So let's start with the video, the girl Erin. In her story, she had sort of a message that was in the conversation of the rest of the thing. It was her monument. It was something that meant something for her. It meant how she could go forward. What was it for her?
She was told she was not a starter.
You're not a starter. You're gonna be in the background. You're great at support, but you're not a starter. Who did that come from?
Her mentor.
A mentor, someone important to her. How many of us have messages, monuments, stories, events, things that people have said? Now, sometimes those things are really good, right? Sometimes they are beneficial, hopeful things for us, and we bear them with us. Sometimes they are things that are not so helpful. They're like little tape-recorded messages playing over and over and over. You're worthless, you're nothing. Think of some of those monuments in your life, those events and those times and those things.
John has one that I take more serious than she does.
In
She
case
had
y'all
a
want to hear it, it's going to be delivered.
10th to 12th, 11th, 12th grade math
Told
teacher.
by, I thought it was the counselor. Okay.
Okay, whoever. Told her in 11th and 12th grade, you know, you probably really aren't college material.
Yeah. Got a PhD.
Guess who got the very first invitation when she earned her doctorate?
Right.
That lady in Marietta, Georgia. Got invited to Jolin's
But it
graduation.
was a motivation for me.
Sure. So sometimes those things can be not great messages, but it lights a fire under us, right? So it can be helpful overall. But right, that's a great example. But sometimes, and oftentimes, it's those really small things. Sometimes it's a repeated thing, right? But sometimes it is one little event. Here's an example from my life that I didn't realize until I was in graduate school. Something that happened when I was very young, and my mom had a cat. And she was this old, like she was old when I was little. She was a grumpy old Persian cat, right? I got a cat of my own, and I named he was named Joe after a friend of mine, but it was an orange cat because of Coco's Kitten. If you remember, if you ever read that book about a gorilla who has a kitten, and it's a tearjerker. It's a great book. Anyways, well, my cat was a male cat. He got an infection and died. And in my childish grief, I said, why couldn't the old cat die and my cat? And my mom responded in a very reasonable way. Well, think about how I feel about that, right? That's my cat. Or you're saying that you want my cat to die so that you don't have to grieve. And okay, that's interesting. And I didn't realize that was a message and a monument for me. It's not correct, right? And I have realized, okay, that's maybe not the way to go, but that's kind of my primary mode of thinking about those things. Anybody have any others that you want to share?
I relate a lot to what Jolyn says about hers. I'm far more motivated by somebody telling me I can't do something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, we try our children and our grandchildren to just tell them how great they are and how wonderful they're doing things. Sometimes that's not what they need to hear.
Right.
They need to hear what's wrong and what needs to be fixed and what it takes to be successful at things. And
Absolutely.
not that it's just going to be handed to you.
And what's interesting is, again, the event itself is not always the thing that determines it. Someone telling you you can't go to school, you can't do something, doesn't necessarily mean, okay, I'm going to bear that with me. I'm going to, I can't do this. Then we bear that with us, right? But if we go, oh yeah, just watch me, then that can be motivational. The difference is how we interpret it. The difference is how we kind of tell that story. There's a quote about those who often look at themselves or tell their stories in sort of a redemptive way. I was lost, but now I'm found. Tend to be much more happy, and look at their life as different to those who say, "Oh well, it used to be so great, and now it's terrible," type thing, right? Which makes sense. So Nicole spoke of the four-way brokenness in the world. Do you remember that? Anyone remember what the 4 ways of brokenness is? How are we broken as like fallenness? What relationship was broken in the garden? Trust. Okay. What relationship?
Their relationship with God.
God and humanity, right? That was one way that was broken, right? They ate the fruit. We're going to talk about this in just a minute. But they ate the fruit, and what is their immediate reaction? They hear God in the garden, they go,
let's hide.
Right. They hide. Okay. What is another way that we are broken because of the fall? What other relationships are broken?
With ourselves.
With ourselves, right? We don't really truly understand our own motivations. The good that I want to do, I don't do, and the evil that I don't want to do, that's the stuff that I do, right? There's a disconnect in ourselves. What else?
Our family too. Family.
And others in general, right? Our relationships with others are broken. Again, back to the Garden of Eden. How were they? What was their clothing state before the fall?
They were there.
They were naked, and they didn't care. There's no reason to hide from one another. They ate, and what did they do? I'm gonna hide myself from you. I don't want to be vulnerable with you, the only other person in existence, right? And what's the 4th one? Remember?
Wasn't it country or something?
Similar, yeah. It's just the world. That there's a brokenness with and in the world. With the world, that our relationship with creation has now changed. Again, in the garden, it's not, you're going to cultivate all this wonderful stuff that I've already prepared for you. You're going to get out of the nice garden, and you're going to go have to beat creation into submission. You're going to have to deal with rocks, and you're going to have to deal with weeds, and you're going to have to deal with thorns. It's not going to be easy. But also there's a brokenness to creation, as Paul talks about, that the whole creation was subjected to futility and hope. And all creation waits and groans for the revealing of the children of God. That the creation is part of the redemption story as well. There is, on your sheet, there's a little activity. Maybe we won't do it right now. But at least glance over. There's several questions or statements, right? Ways that we kind of the ways that the enemy works in getting us to doubt the intentions of God. God doesn't really need me for any big purpose. My life isn't that important. God is distant and doesn't care about me. God hasn't fixed my struggle or hurt or trouble, so I must not be worth it. God is punishing me because I haven't been good enough. I've been hurt in the past, and God didn't help, so I'm on my own. Others have it a lot worse than I do, so my problems don't need God's attention. Which is why I thought of the cat story. These are all statements that we can look at theologically, we can think at mentally, and we go, oh yeah, that is incorrect. But we don't always feel it, do we? I'll let you look that list over at some point, and I again, all of these things that I'm providing you with that come from the book, they're for us to reflect on ourselves. Right? If you're not truthful, then you're lying to yourself, and it's not going to do anybody any good. But how do these things feel? Right? Do you struggle with these kind of ideas? Did you used to struggle with these ideas, or are these things? Some of these maybe you've never even thought of before. Hopefully, this is not going to spark new struggles, but could be. Maybe it's something that you've been struggling with, and you don't even realize it. We all struggle, don't we? I lift up to you Colossians 1:21. And you notice there's a blank there. Any guesses what the blank might be for?
Is it Satan?
Nope.
I couldn't figure it out.
You could write something in there. What?
The individual's name.
Write your own name in there. So Aaron, once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. Right? Because we gloss that over. We think that, oh yeah, we've always been good. Especially when we grow up in the church. We go, oh yeah. I've always known about God. No. At times we've been enemies of God, right? At times we've completely ignored what he's done, and we need to take that seriously. Because we don't realize, if we don't say, I once was lost, but now I'm found, we don't get to amazing grace. It's just pretty good grace. It's grace that I actually secretly deserved because of all the good stuff that I've done, right? If we don't really claim our sin, we don't actually get there. Let's look a little bit more at that Genesis story. So Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. And I want you to pay attention. How does the serpent speak? What does the serpent say? Now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. But God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die, says Eve. Is that correct? Would someone look up Genesis 2:17? When you get to it, read it out loud.
But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall die.
So don't eat of the fruit. The day you do so, you will die. What does she say? What does Eve say in chapter 3?
She says they're not supposed to eat of it or even touch it.
Don't even touch it. And what happens if you touch it?
You die.
You're going to die right then. Right? So her own interpretation has kind of skewed things a little bit. Right? She doesn't have all the facts straight. But what is the serpent doing? Are you sure that's what he said? Are you really sure? Oh, you can't eat anything in the garden? right? He knows that's wrong. He knows that's incorrect. But he opens the door so she can kind of sort of get it right, and not quite, and then he uses that to needle just a little bit of doubt. Just a little, it's something a little bit different. Let's go to the New Testament and go to Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Which providentially is actually our scripture for Sunday. Speaking of which, if anyone would like to help with lay leadership, I'd be happy to have some volunteers. Before I voluntold.
What chapter is that again?
Chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. In many ways, it's a very similar story. Do you think that's on purpose? Yeah. There's definitely Matthew is definitely calling our attention to a very similar conversation in Genesis. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. But he answered, It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying, If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands you will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, Again it is written, Do not put the Lord your God to the test. Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, All these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me. Jesus said to him, Away with you, Satan, for it is written, Worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. So what do you see there? How does the devil, what does he do?
It tries to plant doubt.
Doubt. Doubt in what?
Doubt in what?
In what does he put doubt?
Oh.
He wants to
Doubt that he
plant
was the Son of God.
doubt in general, but okay, Son of God, and when in Eve's story, what is the doubt?
What God said.
What God said.
But this is sort of like prove that you're the Son of God.
Mm-hmm. But it's also, remember, this is immediately after what?
Baptism.
It's baptism. And the end of the baptism story is what? The Holy Spirit descends. You are my son. Right? Well, if the crazy voice from the sky is correct, right? It's doubt in God's intentions. It's doubt in God's instructions. It's doubt in, does God really know what's going on here? It's that kind of stuff. Is that big stuff? Is that big monumental sort of huge doubt the very existence of God sort of thing? Sometimes it's that little needling. A little...
Anytime you have doubt, you can't do anything.
Right.
Doubt yourself.
It kind of shuts you down. You can't
sure
make
that's
any...
what you heard God say when you were baptized?
Right. Are you sure? Are you sure? You are a child of God? Are all of your sins really forgiven? I'm not sure. Right? And we can let these little things just kind of, well, what if this is all just a bunch of fairy stories? Right? Just little things. And and yet our small struggles, our little s struggles, are signs of what? Did she say? Not lowercase s, but uppercase s, struggle. What does that mean? Any thoughts? So a lowercase s struggle is just a struggle, right? Minor struggles, things that we go through. What might the uppercase struggle, if we talk about struggle,
You got some serious problems.
could be more serious problems, or it's the problem. It's the struggle. What is the struggle? Is our struggle against flesh and bone? Ultimately? No. Where's our struggle? Where's the cosmic struggle that is going on all around us?
We sort of want to be in control.
Yeah, we want to be in control, but the ultimate struggle is, yes, for control. It is God. And all the things that try to separate us from God. Right? And Satan or the devil is a personification of that sin and death. That the struggle that started there in the garden. The struggle that continued on there in the wilderness. And continues in us, right? It's the struggle of sin. It's the struggle of death. It's the struggle of all of this stuff, right? In that struggle, we're participating in this overall narrative, this overall struggle against sin and death. 2 Corinthians 11:14. A little bit more about... And no wonder, even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Or another translation says, he masquerades as an angel of light. Remember that? What does the word masquerade mean? Impersonate, right? It's definitely got some connotation to it. It's impersonate with ill intent, sort of. You don't usually masquerade as someone for a good reason, right? What does that mean that the devil himself, or Satan there, masquerades as an angel of light?
Because we don't always see.
Acts like the word of God is emissaries.
Yeah, right. Like one of God's emissaries. We don't really see.
Try to lead us down the wrong path.
And it's in deceptive ways. It's in small ways, right? There are some folks who are really scared about the devil. The devil did this and the devil did that, and, right? And sometimes, yeah, that might be true, but it's usually that just little, needly, small things, right? Because we're like sheep. And sheep don't usually just say, I'm going to get lost today. They go one blade of grass at a time, and I'm just going to kind of move on over here, and that's how we work, right? It doesn't usually start as open defiance. But this is where this is going. This is just part of the story, right? We are sinners. We once were blind, but where's this going? What did Christ do while we were still sinners? Died for us. Rarely someone is going to give up their life to save someone who is okay. morally correct. Maybe someone would be willing to give up their life for someone who is actually righteous and good. God showed his amazing grace in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were struggling against the monuments that we have resurrected in our lives, while we were going around telling everybody that we're basically okay, we're good, we're nice, people like us, while some of us maybe even were running as fast as we could away from the living God. That is when Christ died, because that's when we needed it. When does forgiveness come? Right when we fall. Right when we need it. I mean, we don't have to then ask for forgiveness and do something really nice to make up for the bad thing. No. God forgives us right when we mess up, if we've accepted Him. One day when we're in the divine courtroom, we will have I am not looking forward to this. We will have no doubt whatsoever that we stand in condemnation and guilt. And neither will all of creation will have no illusions about our own guiltiness. And at that point, Christ himself, the judge, the divine judge, who has his declared guilt, also steps down and says, "And I have paid the price already." Done. All those things do not matter. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost. Now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Let's close in prayer. Jesus Christ, you've promised that nothing can ever separate us from your love. Whether we are in trouble or struggling or in need or in danger or even being threatened with death. No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through you, Jesus, because you love us. So we are convinced that nothing can ever separate us from your love. Neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither our fears for today nor our worries about tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from your love. No power in the sky above or in the earth below, indeed nothing in all creation, will ever be able to separate us from your love. Amen.